afternoon to all of you. First of all, thank you very much for the organizers for the opportunity to represent our company at the conference. And I try this tool if it works. Yes. My name is Csaba Szunder. I'm in charge of product marketing for Michelin, as they say in Dublin, Michelin, French company. Because our chairman said that this is a deadly session in the afternoon, if you don't mind, I'd like to show a very short film to illustrate some of the points which I'd like to share with you in the next 30 minutes. So if we can start the film, I would appreciate that.
We are actively involved in motorsport. Because it's in our DNA. Because our goal is to improve mobility. Because we care about safety. Because we want to test our solutions in extreme conditions. Because we take our technologies from track to street. Because it enables us to prove the value of our tires. Because we are innovators. Because we are proud of our success. Because we are passionate. Because you are passionate.
You might say, I'm at the wrong conference. This is not about motorsport, this afternoon, but commercial vehicles. In fact, what I'd like to share with you is that it's exactly the same passion, if not more, which is driving us when we are developing tires for commercial vehicles, like it is the case for motorsport. The 4 points I'd like to share very quickly with you, a couple of words about the company for those who don't know Michelin. Then I'd like to focus on the tire environment, the commercial tire environment in the Middle East, including legislation. Then a few words about tire development from manufacturer's point of view. What are some of the considerations we have to keep in mind when it comes to development of tires, and to share with you our ambitions for the Middle East. Company Michelin, in few words, company which is one of the worldwide players, almost 14% worldwide market share. We are present in 170 countries, out of which 70 countries are grouped under Michelin, Middle East, Africa, and India, which is headquartered here in Dubai. We've got several production sites, 68 plants across 17 countries, making almost 180 million tires a year. And we are also making maps and guides. 30 million maps and guides we sell. And we have almost 113,000 qualified staff, out of which 6,000 are working in research and development, which we believe is a key differentiator between us and some of our competitors. Michelin is not about Michelin brand only. There are a number of other brands which are under our portfolio, and some of them appear in the commercial tire world, like Cormoran, like BF Goodrich, or the brand Recanic. We are selling also here in the Middle East. So, commercial tire environment. When we look at history of commercial vehicles, It starts quite a long time ago, 3,500 years before modern times. The first commercial vehicles, the war chariots, were developed, and already these vehicles were associated with wheels and later on with tires. We have to wait quite a few years, several thousand years, to get one of the first steam engine powered vehicle, which is, we can consider one of the first commercial vehicles. It's actually French Cugnot who developed this machine, which was actually carrying military equipment. And that vehicle was already equipped with wheels and a little bit lighter tires than it used to be a couple of thousand years ago. Then we jump 100 years to one of the new equipments, which is called Eclair. This was one of the first equipment carrying passengers. It was carrying passengers between Paris, Bordeaux, Paris, 30 kilometers per hour, every speed, a record at that time. And the key point is that it had a tire, it has a wheel, with a demountable tire, which was very important, because this tire could last 170 kilometers, and yet it had to be replaced. We jump again, but not more than 50 years, to come to 96, which was the invention of the radial tires. A very important invention for the tire industry, because with this invention we could really expand the performance of the tires. Whereas this tire made 170 kilometers, when we come to today's tires, they are able to make up to 1 million kilometers in certain usage conditions through different lives, new and retail of course. So a very important movement of tire across the history, always associated with commercial vehicles. When we look at history, tires change, but the basic functions of the tires are exactly the same as it used to be several thousand years ago. What are these? The tire is supposed to carry loads. The tire is supposed to transform the energy into motricity, grip, which is driving the vehicles. The tire is supposed to help handling of the vehicle easier, maneuvering. The tire is supposed to help to go through some barriers, some difficulties, some obstacles. And of course the tire is there to limit the rolling resistance of a vehicle so that there is less energy consumption. These functions didn't really change over the course of the years. When it comes to Middle East, we have got some difficult environments. As you can see, we are in a zone which is full of challenges for tire manufacturers because of extreme temperatures, extreme overload in some countries, speed, very difficult road conditions in some countries. Not to forget that we are still in countries where price is an important aspect. So in these difficult conditions where the road transport is a very important industry, as we have seen in the beginning in the presentation, our tires need to resist some shocks which maybe they are not necessarily confronting in some other part of the world. Difficulties in terms of physics, if I take heat, extreme heat. Chemical difficulties to face, ozone, humidity, very important aspect. Or mechanical aspect, which means in some countries the tires have to go across very difficult, different road conditions, especially in mixed usage on-off-road conditions. So all that is an important aspect to consider when it comes down to tires. When we are in the Middle East, we cannot pass without talking about the regulatory environment. This regulatory environment for tires are present everywhere in the world. We have a colleague who is working and coordinating that activity from the United States, and when we had a chat a couple of weeks ago, he confirmed to me that when he looks across the globe, Middle East is the zone which is most probably has got the strictest and the most dynamic regulatory environment when it comes to tires. Here I just take an illustration for one of the key regulations, which is the GSO organization, having 3 articles for tires. And I'm just showing you the principle of those regulations without going into details. Obviously, there are some requirements for the conformity of the tires when it comes to markings, when it comes to the dimension of those tires, which is obvious. But there are some tests also which normally all the tires which we sell or other companies selling in the zone needs to meet. Braking energy test. This is a test, you can see the principle here. It's a very simple test, which is basically looking at the capacity of the tire to resist to some mechanical penetration. 5 points are measured across the circumference of the tire, and depending on the size and the construction of the tire, there is a minimum level of braking energy which the tire needs to be formed. If it's not the case, then the tire is not conform to the regulations here in the Middle East. Another important test is endurance test. Endurance test is basically a rolling test on some drums in the machines, where according to the tire size and the load capacity of the tire needs to run under 3 different levels of load, sometimes even overload conditions, and the tire needs to withstand that pressure, and sometimes they have to run over the course of 48 hours depending on the tire size. So that's the second major test which GSO requires for tires which are sold here in the zone. The test needs to be done on an annual basis. Certificates are issued on an annual basis. It's quite a heavy administrative burden for those who are familiar with that. We have to mention also that there is a very strict age restriction when it comes to Middle East. You know, for commercial vehicles today, the regulation is that commercial vehicle tire cannot be sold if it is older than 30 months. That's the current rule which is in vigor. When it comes, this is for new tires. When it comes to retread tires, there is a specific regulations and annual audits which all the retread plants needs to go through in order to get the certification to make retread tires for the zone. We have to say also that this environment is very dynamic. There are some new rules which are coming, and as we were discussing with some of you on the break, it's sometimes very difficult to follow those rules because there are so many changes. One of the key evolutions is labeling, including RFID, which is embedded in the new labels, which is going to be in vigor from 2015 here in the UAE. New regulation coming from starting 2016, rolling resistance, and hold on, wet grip in the Middle East. This is going to be also a regulation which needs to be implemented. So all the tires which are sold in the Middle East, there is a minimum threshold they need to meet if you want to commercialize it. On all those regulations, a number of animations we see all over the places in the different countries, safety campaigns, a number of roadside controls. I think this morning again there was an illustration from Abu Dhabi DOT that it's an important aspect of their everyday life to control the environment, to make sure that the basic safety aspects are there. I think all actors agree on the fact that safety is not a regulatory question. It's also a question for manufacturers, importers, dealers, for the distribution. It is also a very important aspect for the end users, for the transporters. If the three are not working together, then the safety aspect is not going to improve. But the question is, if we look at the safety aspect, is it enough to bring performing tires into the Middle East? Which is my couple of thoughts on that, which is my next chapter. We as a tire manufacturer are going through different steps when we are developing and manufacturing tires. I think it's not revolutionary. Many of the manufacturers are doing something similar. It starts from customer needs, from the marketing side. Feasibility study, which can be technical, which can be commercial, in order to see if we can or if we need to develop some new solutions. Prototype stage, because today, even if we have the most powerful computer-aided design and very powerful computers, the new materials which are revolutionizing the industry requires that we really test them in real-life conditions, in interaction between vehicle usage conditions on the field. So prototype stage, which is after followed by industrial feasibility and field surveys. Very important field surveys, which are real-life applications in the given countries which we are targeting. At the end, we have new products which are appearing in the commercial catalog. The designer, who is a key actor in that, is faced by a major challenge. The The designer's role and mission did not change over the course of the year. It's a game of arbitrations and trade-offs between different aspects of the tire. It needs to negotiate basic performance criteria, whether it's on the braking, dry braking, the tire life, rolling resistance, dry handling, noise, comfort. He has to make an arbitration to bring a tire which is adapted for certain usage conditions and for certain applications. But there is one very important aspect we have to keep in mind, that all that needs to take into consideration the usage conditions which exist in a given country. Let me share a couple of thoughts on the usage conditions in the Middle East. First of all, we are in a zone where there is a high temperature. You can see here a number of countries are listed as an illustration with the ambient temperature, which is basically the 2 hours hottest temperature observed minimum 9 consecutive days in a year. And you can see that there is a very important difference between Middle East and, for example, Europe. If one develops a tire which is performing in Europe, it might perform very well in Middle East conditions. Ozone emission. You look at the map, I think we are in one of the zones that this is a key issue. And the tire as such needs to withstand that ozone it is exposed to in terms of resistance to freezing, cracking, which can be an issue in some cases, especially for industrial commercial vehicles who are working under sun and ozone exposure all along the day. When it comes to load, we heard this morning again, measurements of loads, because it's true that we are living in a part of the world where there are vehicles carrying lots of load. I just shared with you an illustration. This is based on a sample of 25 representative firms here in the Middle East, their parks and the data coming from the park. There are two types of companies in this sample. One, which is, we call it regional transportation, typically vehicles carrying goods between port and manufacturing sites or distribution centers, on-road application. And a different type of activity, regional runoff, when the vehicles, let's say to 5–10% of the time, needs to go off-road to work in those kind of conditions. What I illustrate to you here is the difference in terms of the load distribution for one group of vehicle compared to the others. As you can see, here the average for the front position comes down to around 7.5 tons for the axle on the front, with a range of around 3,000 kilograms between the minimum and the maximum. Whereas in this case, the average is 8.3 ton, very different, with a range which is much wider, with a minimum between 6.7 and 11.5 tons. Sometimes even overload conditions in these applications. If you look at drive position, very similar phenomenon, but what you observe is that actually the range is even wider for drive axle tires. You can see for that regional transportation it's 10 tons. For the regional on-off application, it goes up to 10.6 in this illustration in the sample. Regional on-off application is typically application aggregate stamp transport, very important here in UAE, especially in Oman, for example. So you can see that it's not the same conditions when it comes to load. When we look at speed, another very important aspect of the conditions, look at the difference between two types of applications. One which is giving an average speed around 58 kilometers per hour, and you can see the distribution of the speed with a certain curve. Here the regional on-off application is giving 54 kilometers per hour on average, but a very different distribution curve, especially when it comes to the speed range around 75–90 kilometers per hour. The average and the distribution is not the same. And especially when it comes down to the dynamism of the speed, you can see here the accelerometer showing the distribution, longitudinal and vertical acceleration for one application, and another one here, which you see is much more dynamic, much more diverse. Now I tell you one thing. When we come down to selling tires for these different applications, the tires are exactly the same size, they are round, they are black, we are having the same load index and speed index. But still they are exposed to do very different kind of jobs. When it comes to usage conditions, they are evolving, they are dynamic, they are not stable in time. Speed regulations changing almost every month. We look at countries, they have different speed regulations. The maximum speed in Oman is 100 kilometers per hour. In UAE, it is 80 kilometers per hour. And it is changing. Load regulations, a couple of weeks ago I was in Oman, and this is the latest initiatives of the regulatory body to have a very strict control, more and more control on loads, because Oman is highly overloaded market. So it is going to have an impact on the usage condition. Infrastructure. I think if you are living here in Dubai, if you go somewhere in 2 weeks time, you will not find the same road because the infrastructure is changing. And also sometimes the exploitation, the sites are getting better and better conditions, which is having an impact on the usage conditions of the tires and the vehicles. And finally, the vehicle evolutions. I think we are in the automotive conference. If you visit some of the stands, I think it's going to be very clear what are the major evolutions for the future. And just to use an example, I don't know if you are aware, but if you look at the different generation of tires, different generation of vehicles, Euro 6, Euro 5, which was a major evolution in Europe, the difference in the two generations when it comes down to buses and coaches is 400 kilos extra load on the axles because of the engine evolutions, because some additives which needs to be carried in the vehicles. I think there are some people from the construction, from the automobile industry. And also, because for these public transport activities, what is very important is the ozone emission per passenger, which means they try to put as many passengers as possible comfortably in these vehicles, which is obviously increasing the load of these vehicles, which the tires and the vehicles need to follow. What I'm saying here is that the usage conditions are very important. For that reason, Michelin, we are having an approach here in the Middle East. We have a very important network of field engineers. They are not commercial people. They are really engineers who are following vehicles on the field. We've got 25 actually in the zone in order to understand usage conditions of the vehicles. We are, if you calculate, roughly they spend almost 1,700 man days a year to understand different usage conditions in the zone. We are following approximately 7,000 prototypes in order to make sure that the final product, when it comes out on the production line, is going to bring the performance required. And not only prototypes, but also standard commercial tires in order to measure the performance and justify the eventual premium which our tires require compared to some others. So all those activities is leading to new product development. And we have dedicated products for the Middle East. I don't go into details, I don't want to do a product page, but we have dedicated offers. For example, the Coach Tropic range. We have a new range coming out very soon, which is called the X Multi Tropic range, X Coolrunner range for Middle East, and the X Line Tropic range, tires developed specifically for Middle East, for the main applications which are used here. And what is very important for us is that taking into account the specific requirements in terms of environment, regulations, in fact you can see that for Middle East we have a special homologation which goes much beyond the regulatory requirements. Just to illustrate, obviously we are looking at thermal evolution of the tires when it is under usage conditions. We do tests which are rolling tests on straight line or bended roads simulating real life conditions until the tire is exploding. We are making mileage calculations and projecting in function of that the performance and also the safety aspect of the tire before we launch it in any given market. Our ambitions for the zone, very shortly, we would like to continue cooperating with the regulatory authorities as long as the rules are predictable and as long as the rules are feasible and they are really serving the interest of the end users. We would like to develop and bring to market new adaptive products, keeping in mind the safety aspect and also cost optimization. I don't know if you know, but here in the Middle East, if you look at the cost of the tire in the operational cost of a company, a transport company, it comes down to approximately 30-70% in function of the type of activity. So it's not negligible, this cost in the overall operational expenses. And if we can optimize on that, it has got a major impact on the bottom line of the firms to make them more competitive in a competitive environment. And the last point is that we are working in very close collaboration, partnership with some of our distributors. You can see some of them listed without, it's not an exhaustive list, but some of the major actors here in the Middle East. In order that these partners are helping the transporters to bring the full potential of the tire out of that. To provide services, to prolong the life and the service life of the tire, which is an important aspect. As we heard this morning, the average life of the vehicles is also expanding, so it's very important that one key aspect which represents 15% of the cost is really followed up over the time and recommended for the right application, the right method. Well, I started with a film. If you don't mind, I'd like to finish with a film, which is illustrating all these aspects through the eyes of the customers. So if it's possible to start the film, 3 minutes, I would appreciate it.
تكون فيها مواصفات السلامة عالية شوية، لأنه أول شيء حياتي بتعتمد عليه، بالإضافة إلى أنه كذلك سيارتي بتعتمد عليه. بنقطع مسافات كبيرة، المسافات أحيانا تتجاوز 6000 و 7000 كيلومتر، لأن شغلنا غير الخليج العربي عبارة عن شغل الخليج الشرق الأوسط ولا شمال أفريقيا في بعض الأحيان. فالإطارات هذه لازم تتحمل جميع هذه الظروف المناخية اللي البلاد كلها بنمر فيها.
Most of the material that we transport for long distance, they perishable items, fruits, meat, it's all frozen. If it is not in time, it gets bad. It is not only about wastage of that material, but it is also about the fines that you have to pay to the authorities to dispose that material, and it's a huge loss. So it is very important for us not to have any breakdowns and to keep things running properly.
الإطار هو أهم، لا تنسى أنه من أهم مبادئ المصروف أو التكلفة أي منشأة نقل بشكل جزء أساسي مهم نمط المنشأة، لأنه يعتمد على سلامة السيارة وسلامة الطرق اللي تمشي فيها. في عندك مواد كيميائية وعندك مواد بتروكيميكال وديزل ووقود، إنه ما يتعطل وتوقف السيارة ويتأخر توصيل الأوردر بوقته.
أكثر صعوبة تواجهنا الوقت، لأننا ملتزم بكون دقيق جدا في الوقت إن وصول الشاحنة لأرامكو ليها وقت معين لازم توصل فيه، وقت التحميل إنه ملتزم بيه، وليا وقت إن أنا لازم أفرغ الحمولة في وقت معين أو في زمن معين عشان ما أفقدش نسبة توفر من المواد البترولية. لا أرامكو المواد الدقة بتاعتها، فبنحاول قدر الإمكان إن إحنا نلتزم، فدي أهم التحديات اللي بتقابلنا. يعني قد ما اقدر اتجنب صعوبات الطريق بين القطارات ولا قدر الله الحوادث. تطوير طبعا شغالين احنا في المؤسسه وجهودكم وجهود ميشلان طوروا القطارات، ودي حاجه بتميزنا احنا اكتر من تميز ميشلان، ان انا ابقى عميل ميشلان دي حاجه تشرفنا اكتر يعني احنا بنشرف.
So those are the aspects which are really motivating us and feeding our passion on an everyday basis to drive the development of the tires. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm ready for questions if you have.
Any questions?
Microphone?
Hi, thank you very much for the nice presentation. I would say some of out-of-the-box question. This region is pretty much large when you talk about tires, in terms of replacement, in terms of consumption, and in terms of what is getting supplied in the market right now, right? And there is a lot of potential which some of the government departments started sensing, and they are exploring opportunities if something can be done on the ground of setting up manufacturing units in this part of the world related to tires and some of other components. So tire is something which is very high on priority right now for them, right? So from your experience, because it's an import-based market which only have 5% import duty, tires can be shipped from anywhere in the world. Is it something which as a manufacturer seems feasible to you? If yes, then what are the reasons for that? That would be my first question.
The question is it feasible, or do we imagine to set up manufacturing facilities here in the Middle East?
In the Middle East, yes.
I'm not from industrial side. What I can say is that we have already done this step. In manufacturing today, I think what is the key point is efficiency. So we are really looking for coverage of certain zones from one unique manufacturing point to save on logistics and to develop tires which are adapted for a given zone. For that reason, in fact, there was an investment, a very important investment, a couple of years ago to set up a factory in India. There was different scenarios, and finally the choice was for India. And today we have to say that this is our biggest manufacturing plant and the most modern manufacturing plant, which has got a huge capacity to supply even the Middle East, because logistically it's not that far away from us. On top of that, we have moved quite recently our research and development centers from Asia to India in order to have the right people and the skill set to develop tires for the Middle East. We have people obviously from Middle East in that team in order to develop those products which are adapted for those very difficult usage conditions here. So we don't have, as of today, as far as I know, major ambition to develop a manufacturing base in the Middle East, but that's something which can change over the course of the year.
When we talk about retailing business, in this part of the world, we have seen some growth in recent years. Is it going to be one of the key focus areas for most of the tire companies? If I talk about the branded companies coming into this business, or it will be more dominated by the different players altogether, not by Michelin or those companies, but different players in the market. So how do you see that?
The way I see it is that if you look at on the geographical parameter, which is large, Africa, Middle East, and India. So let's make a small journey. Retreading India, huge business, very important. Retreading in Algeria doesn't exist. Retreading in Morocco, very limited. Retreading here locally, Middle East, very important. In such a diversity which is driven by different factors. First of all, does it make sense to develop a retread business? Why it is interesting to make a retread business? If there is, first of all, good quality casings which allow to make a retreading, to make a second, third, fifth life. In South Africa, for example, it's not unusual that people retread 4 or 5 times because the usage conditions allow us to do that with some specific tires which are developed for themselves. Here in the Middle East, it's also a very important business, even though we have to say that it's a big challenge. That's why there is annual audits, because the quality needs to be there. So today, to say what is the future is difficult to predict because it depends on the history and the usage conditions. One thing is for sure, is that the arrival of the cheaper tires coming from Asia, to name some of the countries, is obviously quite an important challenge for the retailers because they are confronted by those solutions which could eventually provide an alternative for those who are seeking to buy a relatively cheap solution. So that's, I think, is going to influence the most the future of the retailing business. But as of today, in the Middle East, it's a very important and I would say flourishing activity. We, as Michelin, are also involved from some joint plans we have set up with some of our partners. Notably, Oman, for example, if I just mention one production facility.
Csaba, thank you very much. We will have to move on. Actually, having listened to your presentation, I'm really reassured that my personal preference of Charles Michelin. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.